Соединенные Штаты.
With the arrival of the Trump administration, this struggle to suppress competitors, if you will, has become particularly evident and open. In fact, the Trump administration in Washington does not hide its ambitions, saying, "We must dominate the energy sector. We will restrict our competitors." Amid escalating tensions with Iran, Russia is now warning that what it calls the United States energy war risks spilling over into a much wider geopolitical conflict, drawing in multiple regions and players. Russia's foreign minister has accused Washington of deliberately sabotaging any chance of restoring normal ties, and of directly undermining already fragile peace talks over the war in Ukraine. Sergey Lavrov argues that while President Donald Trump speaks often about peace and de-escalation, he has left the full arsenal of Biden-era anti-Russia sanctions and laws firmly in place. In an interview with TV BRICS, Lavrov pointed to fresh sanctions and what he described as a de facto war against tankers as proof that US policy is becoming more aggressive and more dangerous. He recalled that in October 2025, Washington slapped major sanctions on Russia's two biggest oil producers, Lukoil and Rosneft, striking directly at the heart of Moscow's energy revenues. Following those measures, Lukoil was reportedly forced to sell off most of its foreign assets, shrinking its global footprint and deepening Russia's sense of economic siege. In April, the law on the state of emergency was extended, the core of which is the punishment of Russia, the introduction of sanctions against Russia, including the freezing of our gold and foreign exchange reserves. This is stated explicitly, in connection with Russia's hostile behavior in the field of foreign policy. Examples cited include interference in the United States elections, something that President Trump categorically opposes and rejects on a daily basis, and violations of international law and human rights. You name it, it's all there. This is pure Bidenism, which Trump and his team reject. Nevertheless, the law was quietly extended, and sanctions against Russia remain in place. Sanctions were imposed on Lukoil and Rosneft in the fall, a couple of weeks after a very good meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Trump in Anchorage. Lavrov has also accused Washington of trying to extend its grip over key global energy supply routes, from pipelines to shipping corridors, as part of a long-term dominant strategy. He said this push relies on coercive tools, sanctions, threats, and extraterritorial laws that shatter any notion of fair competition in global energy markets. The Russian foreign minister claims the US has its eye on Nord Stream pipes, Ukraine's gas transit network, and the Turkstream lines, seeking leverage over each critical route. Lavrov linked ship seizures, cargo inspections, and sanctions at sea to a single, broader power struggle over who ultimately controls energy flows in Europe and beyond. He has gone so far as to describe US actions as a de facto war against tankers and a rolling oil blockade on countries like Venezuela, meant to punish disobedience and reward compliance. The United States, which for many years has been the engine of the global economy and the regulator of global finance, has used the role of the dollar to strengthen its dominant position. It is already objectively losing its economic influence and its weight in the global economy. At the same time, countries such as the People's Republic of China, India, and Brazil are rising. Very interesting processes are taking place on the African continent, linked to the fact that Africans increasingly want to stop exporting their natural resources and instead build up their own industry, as the Soviet Union began to help them do, and so on. Many centers of rapid economic growth, centers of power, centers of financial and political influence have appeared. The world is being reshaped. This is happening in a competitive struggle. The West does not want to give up its once dominant position. Moreover, with the arrival of the Trump administration, this struggle to suppress competitors, if you will, has become particularly evident and open. In fact, the Trump administration in Washington does not hide its ambitions, saying, "We must dominate the energy sector. We will restrict our competitors." Lavrov said Washington's artificial barriers on trade and finance are forcing BRICS countries to develop their own alternative payment systems and financial channels. With Iran now a member of BRICS, Moscow and Tehran find themselves formally grouped inside a single anti-sanctions camp seeking to blunt US and Western pressure. Lavrov stresses that the bloc is actively looking for secure ways to move energy, manage logistics, and fund major projects without exposing themselves to Western vetoes. Remaining as open as India, China, Indonesia, and Brazil to cooperation with all countries, including, of course, such a major power as the United States, we find ourselves in a situation where the Americans themselves are creating artificial obstacles along this path. We are simply forced to seek additional secure avenues for the development of our financial, economic, integration, logistical, and other projects with the BRICS countries. This is not directed against anyone, especially the United States. It is simply because the United States is exercising strict control over all processes in the areas I mentioned and demanding unilateral concessions. Therefore, without refusing to engage with them to the extent that they are willing to do so on a mutually beneficial basis, we are, of course, interested in working with our BRICS partners to create an architecture that will not be subject to the unlawful actions of any player on the Western flank. Lavrov's warnings come just after President Trump imposed yet another round of sanctions on Iran, even as political and military tensions in the region continue to climb. On the 6th of February, Trump signed new tariff orders aimed at countries that keep trading with Iran, raising the cost of doing business with Tehran and its partners. Washington has also rolled out fresh shipping-focused sanctions designed to squeeze Iran's oil exports by targeting tankers, insurers, and port access. These moves landed even as US and Iranian negotiators met in Oman for their first substantive peace talks since the June 2025 conflict, casting a shadow over the dialogue. President Trump has nevertheless described the Oman talks as very good, promising more rounds this week, even as his pressure campaign risks hardening positions on both sides.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.